Hey, this is Dave DeCamp from antiwar.com. This is anti-war news for Wednesday, June 4th, 2025. All right, the first story at the top of antiwar.com today. Israel kills 27 in new attack near Gaza aid site. So Gaza's health ministry said Tuesday that at least 27 people were killed when Israeli forces opened fire on Palestinians attempting to collect aid near a distribution site in southern Gaza. The Israeli military admitted that it opened fire on Palestinians near the distribution site, claiming that it targeted suspects who were approaching IDF troops. The statement did not allege that the Palestinians were armed. And then there's a report from Axios from Barak Ravid, who's an Israeli former intelligence officer. He reported, citing the IDF, that they fired on civilians. And the report here says that they opened fire on a group of Palestinian civilians after they deviated from the designated routes to the aid facility and were approaching IDF soldiers. So that's the only claim, is that they were approaching IDF soldiers. Again, they don't allege that they were armed or anything like that, but they call them suspects, but it's not clear what they're suspected of doing. So this was the statement that the Israeli military put out to the public. It said, quote, "Earlier today, during the movement of the crowd along the designated routes toward the aid distribution site, approximately half a kilometer from the site, IDF troops identified several suspects moving toward them, deviating from the designated routes. The troops carried out warning fire, and after the suspects failed to retreat, additional shots were directed near individual suspects who advanced toward the troops," end quote. And they claim that they were looking into reports of the casualties. And you see this picture here. This is Palestinians mourning someone who was killed in this massacre, in this aid massacre. And Naima Al-Araj, a woman from Khan Yunis who witnessed the shooting, said that there were many martyrs and wounded and that Israeli forces were firing discriminately. She said that she reached the distribution site but did not receive any aid. She said, according to Haaretz, quote, "There was no aid there. After the martyrs and wounded, I won't return. Either way, we will die," end quote. So doctors and medical workers who treated the victims reported that most of them were shot in the head or chest. Doesn't sound like warning shots. According to the health ministry, the latest massacre brings the total number of Palestinians killed near aid distribution sites since the U.S. and Israeli-backed Gaza Humanitarian Foundation began operating in Gaza to 102. So they're saying 102 Palestinians have been killed either on their way to get aid or on the return trip or around the distribution site. The Israeli military has denied responsibility for an incident near an aid site on Sunday where 31 Palestinians were reported killed, but that contradicts accounts from eyewitnesses, medics, and international charities operating on the ground. And there even was a statement from the Israeli military that admitted that they fired in the area. But their official line is they're denying that massacre, and that's good enough for all the pro-Israel people, is just claiming that this didn't happen. And then again on Tuesday it happens again, and they admit it. They admit that they fired at civilians. So Gaza's health ministry said in its daily update on Tuesday that a total of 39 Palestinians were killed and 208 were wounded by Israeli forces across Gaza over the previous 24-hour period. The ministry said that since Israel resumed its genocidal war on March 18th, at least 4,240 Palestinians have been killed and 12,860 were injured. The numbers account for dead and wounded Palestinians brought to hospitals and morgues. So the ministry's number since October 7th, 2023 has reached 54,510 dead and 124,901 wounded. And as we have covered plenty of times before, these numbers are considered an undercount based on studies of them. And then when you factor in, deaths, these are just violent deaths. There was a study recently from The Economist that found that the real violent death toll is likely somewhere between 76,000 and 109,000. And that's not even factoring in people dying of disease, starvation, other medical causes, due to the siege. All right, So the next one here, Christian Zionist is the new director of U.S.-backed Gaza Aid Fund. So Reverend Johnny Moore, an American evangelical Christian leader and staunch Zionist, has been named as the new executive director of the U.S. and Israeli-backed Gaza Humanitarian Fund. The GHF's aid scheme in Gaza has been widely condemned by humanitarian organizations as not nearly sufficient to feed the desperate population of Gaza, and its aid distribution points have turned into death traps, as we just went over. And due to the controversy over the aid scheme, the GHF's previous executive director, Jake Wood, resigned right before the organization began operating in Gaza. Wood said in a statement, quote, "It's clear that it is not possible to implement this plan while also strictly adhering to humanitarian principles of humanity, neutrality, impartiality, and independence, which I will not abandon," end quote. So this new guy, Moore, he's been defending this GHF operation in a series of posts on X, and he has backed Israel's claims that it was not responsible for the Sunday massacre. He's also expressed support for President Trump's proposal for the U.S. to take over Gaza, which would involve the ethnic cleansing of the Palestinian population. And this is a plan that the Israeli government, that Netanyahu, say that they intend to carry out. So this is the new director of this aid. Aid should be in quotes when we say this foundation that's been operating in Gaza. He said he shared a post on X of Trump when he was discussing his plans for the U.S. takeover of Gaza when he first announced it back in February. This is what Moore said, quote, "President Trump always sees war through the eyes of its human cost. And he thinks creatively, never bound by conventional wisdom. He stops wars and makes peace. The USA will take full responsibility for the future of Gaza, giving everyone hope and a future," end quote. So totally on board with Trump's plan. And just the way that people frame this is, oh, nobody ever thought about this before. Nobody ever thought about kicking the Palestinians off their land like it's some novel idea. If Trump really wanted to, go against the conventional wisdom, he would stop arming Israel. So Moore has served as an advisor to Trump, and according to Haaretz, he is a key conduit between Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and American evangelicals who support Israel, who are Zionists, and that is not all evangelicals. Moore condemned the International Criminal Court's decision to issue an arrest warrant for Netanyahu over war crimes in Gaza. This is what he said after the ICC issued the arrest warrants. He said it was a corrupt act by white-collar anti-Semites. He also smeared Munther Isaac, who is a prominent Palestinian evangelical pastor who lives in Bethlehem. Moore said that Isaac is the high priest of anti-Semitic Christianity. And he made these remarks in response to Isaac's appearance on the Tucker Carlson show. If you remember that last year, it really angered a lot of Zionists and American conservatives, kind of the Con Inc. people. And I have Isaac's new book right here. I've been reading it pretty slowly, but it's called Christ in the Rubble. And it's a very good book. I haven't gotten too far. I got to finish it, but I could tell you from reading it, he is not an anti-Semite. It's just completely absurd. But this is the smear. This is the accusation that all these people make. So this is the guy now who is leading this foundation. All right, so the next one here, Amnesty to Israel, stop starvation of civilians as a method of war. So this article is from Brett Wilkins. So as Israeli forces continue to kill and wound desperate, starving Palestinians at humanitarian aid distribution points in the Gaza Strip, Amnesty International on Monday implored Israel to stop weaponizing starvation and called on the world's nations to take positive action to end the genocide, including to stop arming Israel and pressure it to unconditionally lift its cruel blockade. Amnesty said, quote, "The horrific incident in Rafah yesterday in which Israeli forces shot at starved Palestinians attempting to receive food near a militarized distribution site run by the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation demands an immediate independent investigation," end quote. And this is something some Palestinians in Gaza are calling the massacre on Sunday the Witkoff massacre. But Brett gets into kind of some of the details here that we've been talking about these shootings and massacres near the aid points. All right, so the next one here, Ukraine launches attack on Crimean bridge. So the Security Service of Ukraine, the SBU, said on Tuesday that it attacked Russia's Crimean bridge, which connects Crimea and the Russian mainland. The incident marks at least the third time that Ukraine has targeted the bridge since Russia launched its invasion in February 2022. Russian authorities said that the bridge was briefly closed on Tuesday but reopened in the evening, resuming normal operations. The SBU published a video of an explosion underneath the bridge and claimed that its agents mined the piers with 1,100 kilograms of explosives. It said the operation took months to plan. And you can see the video here of the explosion. According to South Front, they said that explosives were detonated by a drone, and another drone exploded without hitting the bridge, and a third was destroyed by a Russian loitering munition before it reached the bridge. And that they released a video of that. It looked like a drone. It was a drone boat on the water. So the attack on the Crimean bridge comes as Ukraine has been stepping up its attacks on Russian territory. Tuesday's incident occurred 2 days after the SBU launched a major drone operation from inside Russia that targeted Russian airfields. So it seems like Russia's downplaying this attack. Again, they said the bridge was back operating as normal on Tuesday evening. But one thing Russia did do on Tuesday is that they formally accused Ukraine of being behind the bridge collapses over the weekend in Russia, in Russian border regions. One of the bridges collapsed onto a passenger train, which derailed it and killed 7 people. The other one, there was, I believe, a freight train was on the bridge when it collapsed and someone was injured. So now they're saying that these incidents are being treated as Ukrainian terrorist attacks. And of course, all this risks a major escalation. We've been seeing a lot of heavy Russian attacks in Ukraine, and won't be surprised if we see those things escalate. And then there's always the risk of this thing escalating into a conflict between Russia and NATO, which shouldn't even be thinkable. But we're at the point now where we're seeing all these attacks deep inside Russia. And the White House is claiming ignorance, claiming that they weren't aware of this drone attack inside Russia. But I find that hard to believe. Some people think that the intelligence agencies could have gone, the CIA could have approved this without Trump's knowledge. But I don't know. I also kind of find that hard to believe that, Trump isn't aware of this. I mean, I haven't seen him say anything negative about the drone attack. Maybe I've missed it. But this happens after Trump was, saying on Truth Social that, if it wasn't for me, really bad things would be happening to Russia. Putin's playing with fire. Really bad things could happen. And then we see this happen a few days later. But anyway, so, we don't know if the U.S. was directly involved. But what we do know is that the U.S. helped build up the SBU. And experts believe that Ukraine couldn't have pulled this off without intelligence support from the U.S. So again, all this is just very, very risky here. All right, so the next one here, senators push Trump to endorse major sanctions bill. So this one is from Kyle Anzalone at the Libertarian Institute. A bipartisan coalition of senators is lobbying President Donald Trump to endorse legislation that will add new sanctions on Russia. The bill has sweeping bipartisan support in the upper chamber with over 80 co-sponsors, and that's almost the whole Senate. There's 100 senators. It's got 80 co-sponsors, and that bills never get that many co-sponsors, even ones that they all support. So senators are prepared to pass the legislation that would place a 500% tariff on countries that import Russian energy. Republicans in the upper chamber are waiting for Trump's endorsement before moving forward with the bill. Trump has used the bill as a threat to ramp up the economic war on Russia if the Kremlin does not reach an agreement with Ukraine to end the war. However, Trump has not explicitly given his support for the legislation. The Guardian reports that Senator Lindsey Graham has played a key role in prodding Trump to take a more aggressive stance toward Russia in private meetings. So this is, he put a quote in here from a guy named John Hardy, who's at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, which is a very hawkish think tank. So this is from the perspective of someone who thinks ramping up the pressure on Russia at this point would be good. He said, quote, Senator Graham deserves a lot of credit for making the case for tougher pressure on the Kremlin. Carrots clearly haven't worked, so it's time to start using some sticks, including by going after Russia's oil revenue. The economic pressure should be paired with sustained military assistance for Ukraine, end quote. And it seems like Graham does have influence with Trump, unfortunately, because he is really the worst of the worst. And he was in Ukraine just a couple days before the big drone attack, saying, we got to ramp up the pressure and all this stuff. All right, so the next one here, Israel shells southwest Syria after rocket fire. This one's from Jason Ditz. So for the first time since the regime change in Syria in December and the subsequent Israeli invasion of the southwest frontier of the country, Israel reported rocket attacks against their territory in the occupied Golan Heights coming from Syrian soil. The rockets set off sirens in Ramat and Haspin, though they were said to have landed in an open area without causing any injuries. Israel responded with artillery strikes against both Quneitra and Dara governance, saying they were targeting the source of the rockets. And the reports say that they hit agricultural areas in the western part of Dara. No casualties were reported so far, though it seems like there could be a big escalation from Israel over this rocket fire. Defense Minister Israel Katz says that he's holding Syria's leader, President Ahmed al-Sharaa, directly responsible for the incident and warned that Israel's full response would be coming soon. Israel has launched an enormous number of attacks against targets inside Syria since the regime change, on top of the ongoing ground invasion. So again, this is the first time there's been a rocket attack. They're telling us, they're justifying invading Syria and launching all these airstrikes, saying that there's this big threat coming from Syria. Yet after how many months has it been since the regime change? 6 months. This is the first incident of rocket fire against Israeli territory, occupied territory in the Golan Heights. So we might see more Israeli airstrikes in Syria in response. All right, so the next one here, Syrian Islamist leader Sharaa to visit U.S. to address the UN. So in December, this is another article from Jason. So in December, after the Islamist Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, HTS, took power in Syria, the Biden administration lifted the $10 million bounty on the head of Ahmed al-Sharaa, formerly known as Abu Muhammad al-Julani. Sharaa has gone on quite an effort to improve his reputation in the West, and with the U.S. in particular, distancing himself from his al-Qaeda past and talking about reconciliation within Syria, where he is now president. In September, he will now, according to this report, will become the first Syrian leader to visit the United States since 1967. And his visit was reported by Syrian state TV and was said to include a planned address to the UN General Assembly. It seems like this is the purpose of the visit, is to go speak at the UN in New York City. So Sharaa is getting a trip to New York City. Given his relatively recent status as a highly wanted terrorist leader, it's likely to ruffle some feathers. And President Trump met with Sharaa in Saudi Arabia in May. We've covered this stuff quite a bit, his background quite a bit, but it's just something, it's just crazy to me to see the welcome. It's just all out in the open now that the U.S. just is supporting this guy who was an al-Qaeda leader because he doesn't like Iran. That's essentially all this is. But it looks like they're really warming up to him in a lot of different ways that we're seeing. All right, so the next one here, South Korea's new president to seek talks with North. So this is good news here. So South Korea has elected a new president after months of political turmoil sparked by former President Yoon Suk-yeol's declaration of martial law in December 2024, which led to his impeachment. South Koreans went to the polls on Tuesday and elected Lee Jae-myung of the Democratic Party, who officially started his term early Wednesday morning. The Democratic Party's victory over Kim Moon-soo, the candidate representing Yoon's People Power Party, was seen as a reckoning for the martial law declaration. Lee won the vote by a pretty good margin. He got 51.7%, and Kim trailed behind with 39.3%. And in a victory speech to his supporters, Lee vowed to seek talks with North Korea, which is a break from his predecessor's approach that provides President Trump with an opportunity to revisit diplomacy with Pyongyang that he pursued in his first term. So this is what Lee said to his supporters, quote, "I will work to build a peaceful and stable Korean peninsula where coexistence is possible, while firmly exercising deterrence against the North through strong national defense. I believe it is better to win without fighting than to win through fighting, and better still to create a peace where fighting isn't necessary at all. With this conviction, I will pursue dialogue, communication, and coexistence with the North, working together to find a path toward mutual cooperation and shared prosperity, end quote. So this is a big break from Yoon. And that was why, if you remember, I didn't cover the whole Yoon situation much. I covered the initial martial law declaration and how that went down. But if I remember saying, it could be good for the chances of peace on the Korean Peninsula, because I figured his opposition would win the next election, and they are pro, engagement with North Korea. And that seems to be what's happened here. So when Yoon came into office in 2022, he vowed to take a harder line on North Korea, and tensions soared over the following years as the U.S. and South Korea restarted major war games that were suspended under the first Trump administration. And we saw North Korea fire a lot of missiles and everything. And President Biden oversaw very significant U.S. provocations on the Korean Peninsula, including the U.S. deployment of a nuclear-armed submarine to South Korea for the first time since 1981. Huge provocation. He sent nukes to South Korea. And they, the thing about nuclear-armed submarines that the U.S. has is that they could be anywhere in the world. Their missiles are very long range. So if they want to nuke you with one, they could do it from anywhere. But so the whole point of this was to just say, look at our nukes. I mean, that's really provocative. So, all this stuff happened, lots of U.S. bombers flying over there. So tensions, have gotten very high. It seems like it's been a little quiet lately, but, there's been no talks between the North and the South, and you've seen a lot of heated rhetoric from the North. But I think there's a real opportunity here for Trump to revisit, his diplomacy with Kim Jong-un. If you remember, during his first term, he met with him 3 separate times, 2 summits, one in Singapore, one in Hanoi in Vietnam. And then he flew to the DMZ and shook hands with Kim there, which I thought was just a great moment. So I think this is a really easy potential diplomatic win for Trump to pursue. Hopefully he does it. The factor that might prevent it is the fact that things have really ramped up with China, and all the China hawks are going to say, well, all these deployments, all our military presence in South Korea, now it's really about China. And so we want to keep a heavy military presence, do these war games to flex our muscles more at China now. So I could see the China hawks trying to convince him, talk him out of it. But hopefully he pursues this. I really think there's just an easy opportunity here to do something big and something good. All right, so the next one here, Iran says U.S. nuclear proposal includes ambiguities. So on Tuesday, Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi said that the U.S.'s proposal for a nuclear deal contains ambiguities and questions, comments that come amid a series of conflicting reports about the U.S. offer. So Araghchi said, quote, "The written proposal we received from the U.S. contains many ambiguities and questions. Many issues in this proposal are not clear," end quote. He also said Iran would have a response in the coming days. So the big thing here, obviously, is that the U.S. and Iran have been over enrichment. And so, again, this is kind of confusing. So if you remember yesterday, I covered that Axios report that said they made an offer that allows Iran to continue some lower level enrichment, at least for an undetermined period of time. And then Trump said, any deal will eliminate Iran's enrichment. And I mentioned that Reuters and the New York Times had these reports saying that the U.S. proposal did demand Iran end enrichment. Well, there's another report from the New York Times on Tuesday that makes sense, like it's like a piece of the puzzle that actually kind of makes sense why these reports seem conflicting, and then Trump said what he said. So according to this New York Times report, the U.S. proposal would allow Iran to enrich uranium at low levels for an interim period until new nuclear facilities are set up by a consortium of regional countries, including Saudi Arabia and other Arab states. But the plan, according to this report, involves Iran ending enrichment on its soil and being involved in the nuclear enrichment, which, judging by what this New York Times report said, would be in another country. And I just cannot see Iran going for something that ends its enrichment on its soil and because then it could only get nuclear fuel from this consortium, but the U.S. Would have the power to cut that off. Just through sanctions, I would assume. So I can't see Iran going for that. And if you see what Araghchi says here, I'll just read, what he said. This is, again, just something he said on Tuesday amid all these reports. He said, quote, "Continuing enrichment on Iranian soil is a red line. And this is an undeniable fact that now seems to be accepted by all countries. Enrichment has become a matter of national pride and source of honor for the Iranians," end quote. So he specifically said, continuing enrichment on our soil is a red line. So again, it kind of, with the conflicting reports. So, if Trump said that they will not allow any enrichment of uranium, according to this New York Times report, ultimately the idea for the deal is to stop uranium enrichment in Iran, to end it. That's the ultimate goal of this proposal. So it does kind of align with Trump's comment. So again, I find it hard to believe that Iran would go for this. And I guess the possibility is that this consortium, and I bet maybe if they would even be open to this, their counter proposal could be, we could do this consortium thing, but it's got to happen in Iran, because they don't want to risk, they don't trust the U.S. to lift sanctions and keep them off after the last time. So we'll see what Iran's response is. And of course, all the stuff we've been mentioning, these negotiations are being conducted under the threat that if they fail, then the U.S. is going to bomb Iran. So we really hope that they make some kind of progress here. All right, so the next one here, I left up the one yesterday about Somalia. The next one, the U.S. warns UK and France not to recognize a Palestinian state. This article is from Middle East Eye. So the U.S. has warned Britain and France against recognizing a Palestinian state at a UN conference later this month. Middle East Eye can reveal. France and Saudi Arabia are set to co-host a major UN conference on the two-state solution beginning on June 17th in New York. France is reportedly gearing up to unilaterally recognize a Palestinian state at the conference. Middle East Eye understands that France has been lobbying Britain to do so as well. French officials believe the British government is on board with the plan, according to French media. But Washington privately begun to warn Britain and France against unilaterally recognizing Palestine, sources with knowledge of the matter in the British Foreign Office told Middle East Eye. At the same time, Arab states are urging them to proceed with the move, sources said. In late May, UN member states had consultations in preparation for the conference, during which the Arab group urged states to recognize Palestinian statehood. The Arab group said they would measure the success of the conference by whether significant states recognize Palestine, foreign sources added. So this is something, obviously the U.S. is against this, so this isn't really a surprise. But we saw Mike Huckabee, the U.S. ambassador to Israel, who's cut from the same cloth as this guy, Johnny Moore, who's now the head of the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. Huckabee said in response to Macron's calls or discussions about Palestinian state, he said, "Why don't you could cut a Palestinian state, cut off a piece of France for a Palestinian state." He said something to that effect. All right, so that is it for the news for today. Please go check out our viewpoints. One from Jonathan Cook. Israel is fully integrating its Gaza food aid hubs into the genocide. One from Thomas Knapp, why Iran can't be allowed to enrich uranium. And the argument he's making there is that the U.S. doesn't have the ability or the right to, quote unquote, allow Iran to do anything. The next one from Jacob Hornberger, was the U.S. government involved in Ukraine's drone attack on Russia? One from Ahmed Tibi, Israel, stop killing children in Gaza. That seems like a simple proposal to me. That is written by, published at Haaretz. He is a Palestinian MK in the Israeli Knesset. Our spotlight is from Michael Vlahos, the U.S. Navy's 5 roads to ruin. So please go check all that out. Lots of stuff in our blog as usual. Lots of content. If you want to support the show, you can always support us with a donation at antiwar.com/donate. Like, subscribe, comment if you watch on YouTube or Odyssey or Rumble. If you listen to the podcast, you could always leave a review, especially if you're on Apple Podcasts. And I know other places you could leave reviews as well. And follow us on social media. I'm trying to think. I feel like there was something else I had to tell you, but I can't think of it now. Anyway, that is it for me for today. I will be back tomorrow with some more news. Thanks for listening.